Who is Fabian Lojede? Now, some of you might know him from the TV series Jacob's Cross. He played a villain and he was evil in that series. I've known him for about 20 years as a copywriter, creator, voiceover artist, actor, director. And as it turns out, that doesn't even describe half of who this man is. Zubs and I sat down with Fabian and we had a deep chat, and we were introduced to Fabian the Pan-Africanist. That's a side of him I didn't know. So by the time the chat was over, if he had a microphone to drop and a sentence to seal the interview with, he probably would have said, "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is..." Well, let's let you find out for yourself. Key Africans Unlocked, Season 2. And we have a man who's been trying to hold down and get into the conversation for quite a while because we're firm admirers of his hustle. And we generally just like Fabian Lojede. How's it going?
Great, man. How's it been?
I remember there's one time when I had to ask you whether I'm pronouncing your name correctly because you were nominated for an award for Africa Magic Viewers' Choice. Was it best director or something?
Best actor.
Best actor. And so I was doing the announcements, but you weren't even there. And it was, and the nominees are Fabian Lojede. And I'm like, if I get this name wrong, Fabe's going to be so mad at me. His last name. But good to have you with us, bro.
Same here, bro.
Thank you for affording us some of your time.
Yeah.
So what's going on, man? How have you been?
Not bad. Got married.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations, bro.
Baby.
Nicely done.
Yeah, baby.
Double congratulations. We're going to be doing fist bumps.
We need some Key African branded cigars.
What's that?
We need some Key African branded cigars.
Yeah, we do.
Sometime soon. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
I'm saying at this rate, we're going to be fist bumping the whole show.
Oh yeah,
Because this guy's life. It's like everything is a fist bump moment. I have no problem with that. I'll fist bump you the whole show. I'm good with that.
No, it's been good. The funny thing is about my marriage and my 2 kids. So I got married shortly before I was about to start shooting a new film. Okay. And so we had our first baby, my son. He just turned 3. And we had him she had him around the time I was shooting. Okay. Now, the film isn't out yet because we've been doing a lot of posts. And in between those 3 years, we had our second baby.
Oh, wow.
And then I was thinking, I was saying to myself when we were shooting that, when we premiere this movie, I'm going to say I dedicate it to my son.
No.
I'm going to have to dedicate it to my son and my daughter.
Yeah, wow. Oh, what are the names? Just
Fabian Adeoye is my son's name.
Beautiful.
So Ari is...
Amia done.
Ari.
Yeah. Okay.
So Ari means middle, a center in my Yoruba language. Ade is a crown. So he's in the center of 2 crowns. And the reason why I gave him that is that my maternal grandfather is of royal blood.
okay.
And my paternal grandmother is also a princess. Whatever, the thing about Africa is, unfortunately, I think we tend to take education or Western education as a reason to walk away from our tradition.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So a lot of members of my family, on both sides, aren't really as traditional in the sense of they haven't really taken that royal lineage, that royal culture to the next level. So I just wanted to honor that aspect of my heritage. So that's why I named him Fabian Adeoye, meaning that, he's in the center of 2 crowns, both from my paternal side and my maternal side.
That's brilliant. And your daughter?
My daughter's name is Folashade. And
that's the same name as Sade, isn't it?
yes, the same name as Sade.
That's a full name.
Good call. Yeah. Who knows their Googles and their bios right now?
Yeah. Former radio, whatnot.
No.
So Folashade, she's named after my grandmother.
Okay.
But it's also a beautiful name.
It is.
So Ade is also a crown. Okay. So Folashade means to use grace, wealth as your crown.
Wow. That's deep, man. You put a lot of thought into names. Zubs also like puts a lot of thought into names.
I do.
Generally.
I was gonna say. I was like, I don't have children. What are you talking about? I thought I was gonna say.
No,
Zubs also has named his kids something
I mean,
powerful.
Almost every event, you can kind of count on Zubs to probably be thinking of how to brand it or how to name it. You know what I mean? So I think that's
I can't
something.
help
that,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But names are an integral part of African
I know.
culture.
I mean, like I
Big
named my kids. I named the first one, and we had to balance it out because I'm Bemba by tribe. My mother was Lozi, so that's two different tribes you're dealing with, and then my wife is Shona. So you had to kind of find names that represent all situations there, and I think we've kind of found a balance with the two. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
You know what I find about names? They have a way of obviously manifesting into reality what you have begun by naming the child. So a lot of people when they name, they don't take that into consideration too much, and not just with children, even with like album projects, for example, songs, lyrics, all these things manifest into your reality and the reality of whatever it is you've named, the project, the child, etc. So I find naming to be such a powerful exercise of creation.
No, it is. I mean, I struggled later on in life. I wanted to drop the name Fabian because none of my kids have
An
English names.
Okay.
And because my Yoruba name is Adeoye, and my grandmother, people in my family would never call me Fabian. They all call me Dio. It's only recently that some of them call me Fabian because everywhere they read about me, they see Fabian.
Right.
And I struggled with it. I said, I got to drop this name. It's just not who I am.
It doesn't feel like it represented you.
What made you go, I'm going to keep this?
Okay, I actually went back and I said, okay, why am I struggling with it? I'm struggling with it because I feel it doesn't align with my Africanness to have an English name. And then I realized, okay, so let me think as an African or as a Yoruba person, why would I respect my name? Okay,
Right.
because my family. So I said, okay, why did my father give me that name?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I realized, okay, he didn't give it to me because, or even though I was baptized Fabian, but that was not the reason why he gave it to me. So I later learned that when he was a young student in Germany, back then I think there was Eastern and Western Germany, during the Cold War.
I remember
era.
those days.
Before the wall came down.
Before the wall came down, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this
wall. Hey, and then people are building walls in 2018.
You know?
Trying to invest heavy funds into building the walls. Anyway.
Yeah, so he said he had a friend,
Yeah.
a young Nigerian guy, that they were both students together in Germany, and things were rough at that time, and they were literally, as students suffering, living in the cold, and he swore that his first son, he's gonna name the guy Fabian because the guy was named Fabian.
Like an ode to him.
So I figured, okay, it wasn't some random pick out, appease. There was still a meaning. There was still a story behind it, So I really kept it more out of respect for my father than anything else, and the fact that he did put a thought into it. And then obviously I then started wanting to know, even the guys that owned the name, what does it mean?
The name Fabian.
The name Fabian, and I kind of like the meaning.
What is the meaning?
Okay, so it's got like two different meanings. There's one that says it's a bean grower.
A bean grower.
Right.
Okay, that's lovely. I like
but
that.
then the most common meaning is it was named it's somebody that uses slow, cautious means to wear off opposition. And I think it came about because of Fabius Maximus. And Fabius Maximus was the guy, when Hannibal, when was Hannibal? Yeah, Hannibal was the African.
Yeah,
right?
Hannibal. Yeah, with the elephants.
Was Hannibal. Right, it was Hannibal. So he wore off Hannibal by actually not fighting.
Right.
Where Hannibal had to turn back.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Right. So that strategy of slow, cautious means to wear off opposition, and that's why the Socialist Party in England back then, because they didn't favor violent revolution, they were known as the Fabianist Society, because it was also a slow kind of method to bring in
I'll
socialism.
keep the name. I'm like with all that info. Like,
No, but I just had to know. I just can't be walking around with some
Something on you.
some random, and then you say, "Oh, I'm African," and they're like, "All right,
Okay.
all right,"
An African by the name of Fabian.
and you're talking about Pan-Africanism.
Meanwhile, it's called a war of attrition, I think is what it's called, where you don't actually use guns and bombs and it's either you starve them to death. Like I remember back in the days of like medieval times, they would have a wall around the city. Instead of trying to bomb the city, you surround the city wall so that they can't get out. And at some point,
they have to.
they're
Yeah,
gonna
so
just
you're
have to
like
give up.
suffocating them.
Right,
in
you're
a
just
sense.
suffocating them.
They still do that to us, economically, culturally.
Hey, let's take it there.
Word. Take it there, bro. I mean, they do, bro.
They do.
You know, a friend of mine from Zim was like, I wonder what Zim would have been like if sanctions weren't imposed, right? And I wonder what Mugabe's legacy would have been like in light of all that, you know? Because it's obviously silly, especially in the modern era, the Trump era, to think that world leaders are perfect and everything they do is laudable. Some things they do are not laudable. And you get the hindsight advantage of calling that out, you know? Just like we should get the hindsight advantage of being able to call out when we were done wrong as well by this war of attrition. You know what I mean? On that global scale.
Yeah, but I think we're really divided. I think as a race, as a people. I think they could afford to leave because they knew they could outsource colonialism to Africans based in Africa. So there was really no need for them to stay.
There's something to think about.
They could outsource it
Yeah,
to
like
Africa.
to people who look like them.
So there's no point in staying, right? Because
It's cheaper.
Fabian goes in. Why did you not tell me Fabian goes in? You didn't tell me Fabian
you
goes
see,
in.
Fabian's got
Fabian's
like
the kind of
different.
guy-
Fabian's got different shades to him. You know, I mean, like first time I met Fabian, he was very ad man. That's what I thought. You know. Second time I meet Fabian, this is after now I'm seeing a villain on TV, and I'm not connecting the two because the person, the villain that you played in Jacob's Cross, Bola. I don't know even how deep you have to dig to be that evil. You know, did you have to dig deep?
You know, someone
I'm
told
just
me,
saying there are many sides to you. You know what I mean? Like,
you know, I joked with a friend when she was asking me, man, how do you play that role? You know, you're just so different. You know, you're always so angry. I said it's easy to be angry if you're black and you're African.
Wow, you just tap into that.
Just tap in.
What's
see-
my
you
role?
see- you see-
I'm an angry black guy.
Yeah,
I
but
basically
it
am
was
me.
like angry, black, and manipulative. You know what I mean? Because you were like
Yeah,
a
that's the white
schemer.
side.
That's the white side.
This guy. Oh, Fabian
That's
is
the
going in.
Fabian side.
Fabian is going in. So, I want to go back to what you touched on earlier about taking ownership of something that is perceived to be something that isn't yours, you know? So, for example, if someone says Fabian is not an authentically African name, you know, or like now we're all speaking in English, right? Which
yeah,
is, I guess, what people would say,
unfortunately.
hey, man, English is from England. Why are you all as Africans speaking it?
Yeah.
I wanted to make the point that just like you said that you own the name Fabian because you put it into your life and you've made it what it is, it's the same for English. You know what I mean? It's the same for pretty much anything that has come as a result of us being who we are. We can't keep denying that. I remember when I used to be like in the early days of creating like hip hop music, my accent was a problem, bro. It was a big problem, especially on campus, like in the 90s. You know, I was on university campus in the 90s. And it was always like, yo, man, why do you sound so American, bro? And I don't think I sound American. I think Americans would actually struggle to hear me.
Yeah.
But they would be like, you sound so American, homie, because obviously I was raised with American television and hip hop music, you know? And eventually over time, I think we've come to learn that that is part of the African experience. Being a person whose name has English roots. Your name could be Elizabeth or Edward or Victor, you know? Because why? Because that's who we are as Africans. Whether we like to call it or not, whether it's a sensitive topic or not, this is who we are. You know what I mean? And I don't think changing something like the perception of colonialism is going to change who we are as a people who have come from that history. You know what I mean? So it's not enough to just change the name. You're gonna have to go deeper than that. The name has to be maybe the start, but it's not gonna change who you are. Even language, like you say, We can't, as Africans, all decide we're going to speak Swahili from Cape to Cairo and think that that is going to unify us. That's not going to unify us. It's just a language.
That's true. I mean, before you jump in, I'm also just going to add that for me, for example, to learn your language, to speak Yoruba, you'd have to teach it to me in English. So we're going into like a third-party language to decode our own understanding of each other, which is another interesting dynamic.
It's the power of English as a means of communication, not as a tool of oppression. And I think once we start thinking that way as a continent, we might see some real changes.
I have to differ though. My thinking on that is slightly a bit more radical.
Go ahead.
To be honest, I detest the fact that I speak English, and in a way, I blame my father's generation for thinking the only way to progress is to have your children sound British, or and measure them by how well they speak English. This is just my view. I personally feel that the problem of Africa is actually language as well, in terms of human resource. And I've had this debate a lot with friends, even back home, where the argument is, oh no, but everybody speaks English or everybody speaks French. I have a huge fan base in France, and in the Francophone countries. And every time I go there, I always tell them, and they'll give me a French guy to translate, a guy to translate my English into French. And I say, I really find this quite depressing that I'm in an African country, I have to speak of a foreign language, and you have to translate it in another foreign language. And if you look at colonialism across all the countries that were colonized, particularly by the British, Africa is the only one that has really kept the language and the religion. The Chinese were colonized by the British. They speak their language. They're not Christians. The Indians, the same thing. Yes, they speak English, but they also speak their own language. We're the only ones that think that the only way to progress is, there's a 5, you got a kid. Oh, he doesn't speak Zulu, doesn't speak Yoruba, doesn't speak Igbo, speak English. And it is a trap, don't get me wrong. I've got kids now, I'm trying to speak Yoruba to them, but it's hard because even friends that are Yorubas, their kids don't speak Yoruba. So here I am trying to force my language onto my own kid. And it's a mission, And I still don't buy that. I personally feel that we've lost so many engineers, so many doctors, so many philosophers, because we're measuring their intelligence by a foreign language. People think the more articulate you sound in English, the more intelligent you are. Like, you don't have dumb English people in England that can speak their own language, And if you look at the case of USSR, for instance, so you can take USSR as almost what happened to us as Africa, all right? Where you had Russia that literally colonized this whole place, all right? And I'm sure it was cool to speak Russian during the days of USSR, right? Than maybe speaking your own Ukrainian language or whatever language they were speaking in all the other parts that they overran. But immediately USSR fell apart. I'm not sure that those countries today have continued speaking Russian. And you got countries that are probably smaller than some provinces in South Africa. Not me to sound racist, something Verkevi, Lativ. They've got all those funny Eastern European names.
Right.
They go to university in their language. They go to primary school in their language. They go to secondary school in their language. They're not saying we have to continue in Russian. And I believe that's where we need to go. And this whole thing of where do we begin? First of all, let's deconstruct the borders. Africa, for me, is still a Western construct geographically, geopolitically. It's the Berlin Conference. We were carved together like a birthday cake. You take that part. Oh no, the icing is on there. Oh no, can I have the cherry?
I'll take the cherry. I'll take the icing.
I'm not saying it's going to be easy.
You take the crust. You take the bottom part. What do you think, Chilu? How do you feel about that take on language and the continent?
I believe, there's some things that you're saying, and it strikes me that, for example, I got irked some months ago when there was a video on social media circulating. So people were WhatsApping, it was from Zim. and the lady was trying to get her son or young boy to say in the beginning, and the kid couldn't say in the beginning. I think he was saying beginning. He was saying it incorrectly.
Okay.
And she is in Shona telling him that he should get it right, otherwise she'll slap him or whatever. And she's hard on him not getting in the beginning. And people are circulating it and laughing, and memes are being created. And for me, I didn't find anything funny regarding that from a number of angles. One is, I think, maybe touching on some of the points that you've spoken about. I mean, like, why should English and the fact that the kid can't grasp it in that particular way be a basis for him to get punished and ridiculed on social media, punished by his own mother, kind of thing. And also, I mean, the other factor which doesn't play into what you're saying is it could be like a speech impediment. You know what I mean? And Western world will quickly like get a speech therapist or whatever. We're like, no, get it right, otherwise I'll speak English. Well, so anyway, those are the thoughts that were crossing my mind.
Did you guys have this thing in school where you get punished, or you could get punished for speaking the local language in school?
It used to be the case when I grew up.
I didn't have
Yeah.
You could get punished. So if you're walking around in, let's say, on the playground, right, and they hear you speaking, whether pidgin or anything that's not English, they just call it Vanak.
Yeah.
Vernacular.
Yeah.
Are you speaking Vanak? You down there? You are speaking Vanak. Did I hear you speak Vanak?
I love the accent.
I mean, in your own country, man, you get
'Cause the
punished for
accent is about
speaking
the
your own
Vanak
language.
The accent is a Vanak accent, but the English is not. Are you speaking Vanak?
You down there?
You down there?
You are speaking Vanak. Why are you speaking Vanak?
Look, I agree with you only to the extent that we mustn't judge intelligence on it. We mustn't actually start putting people in sort of like a hierarchical intelligence grouping because you speak really nice English, or your English sounds British, or yours sounds American, or whatever. That I agree. We can't judge people on that. Some of the smartest people that I've ever met, they don't speak the best English. This guy I used to know in high school, he was terrible at English, but that guy's IQ was insane, right? At least my read on it, and his grades were proof of the fact. So up to that point, I agree. But in terms of the language as a means of communication, I feel like we might even be setting ourselves back if we focus on it. Because I feel like it's 2018, guys. We do come from a colonialist background. We were an oppressed continent.
But we're not the only ones.
I agree, and I get it, and that's fine. And I mean, the Chinese still have, Chinese keyboards, and that's great. That's fantastic.
Arabs were colonized. They don't speak English. They speak Arab.
That's fantastic. But they're living in 2018.
Well,
and
Arabic.
we are too. So here's my thing. My thing is this, right? Can we do more to unite the countries in terms of borders and geographics? Yes. Should we be setting ourselves back a few steps by not accepting the fact that we are already communicating smoothly using it? Hold on. I know you don't agree. I know you don't agree, and that's great. That we already communicate smoothly in English across countries, right? I don't think we should focus a lot on that. And I want to move on to the children now. I don't have some of my own, but I have nephews and nieces who, from watching the Disney Channel, they all sound the same. As in, their sensibilities are the same. How they treat local language is the same. No matter how hard you try to speak your own language at the house, these kids with school and playing in the park will come back speaking how they speak on the Disney Channel. So anyway, my point is this. Do you feel there's a more effective way of moving us forward that is authentic to us as a people, an African people, that is not necessarily rooted in things like cosmetics, like language?
Okay, so for me, I think, first of all, language.
You're gonna choke me out.
Yeah.
You don't have a cup in front of you. You're gonna throw that cup at me. Go.
Language should be put on the same platform as land issues. And the reason why I say that is language defines who we are, right? Language is not just a means of communication. It's a cultural identity. It's a spiritual identity. I can't speak for European languages, but I can speak specifically for African languages.
Absolutely.
Our languages serve more than just a means of communication. Our history is usually written in our language, in most African. Do you know when people talk about, I had this argument with someone else again about, Africans are not, we're not scientific. And I said, I totally disagree. You only need to look at our language. When we finished university back in Nigeria, you have to do another exam. You do GMAT, right? GMAT is usually logic. African languages are full of parables. We don't speak straight. That is logic. Because first of all, you have to understand that parable to understand why that person is using it in that context. Meaning, the way an African thinks, he already thinks philosophically once he understands that language.
Power.
Right? So to lose our language for me is already losing our intellectual ability. We cannot afford to lose our language.
Can we do both, Fabian?
I'm not saying drop English. What I'm saying is that there's no reason why every African language has a Bible in their language, but there's no physics textbook. There's no biology textbook. You can go to the most remotest part of Africa. I bet you they can whip up a Bible in their traditional language. Who translated that? So you can read the Bible in your language, but your language is not good enough for universities. I'm sorry, I totally disagree.
Yeah.
That's deep. That's
powerful.
That's deep. Yeah. Okay,
I mean, you can't deny that.
And your last argument about the Bible in different languages. Okay, that's mic drop type stuff.
Yeah, we gotta drop that, Mike. Let's touch more a bit on your religious beliefs / spiritual beliefs. Now that we are talking Bible, how do you feel about that? Where do you stand on that?
So I was raised Catholic, and then I saw the lights.
Which light though? Light at the end of the tunnel. There's a good stream coming.
Say goodbye to all our Catholic listeners and viewers.
No.
I'm kidding.
I'm happy I was raised Catholic. So I think there's one thing the Catholic Church does teach you. Yeah. Boy, you learn to fear God. But I think I was just saying that in the context of Christianity. But when I say I saw the light, I think I was about 12 or 13. I picked up my first James Baldwin book and my life changed forever. And from that point on, I saw religion as religion and I saw spirituality slightly different. And I realized that religion in itself, as this is just my personal view.
Of course,
Christians can,
Please, Chile, can you do the views of the vice president?
I believe that religion is man-made. Religion is an interpretation of what spirituality should be. And that's why you have so many religions, or you can have so many. If you accept that there's only one God, right, then it's more about being God-like, you know? A friend of mine told me something that I'd never knew before. You know, we're talking, and he's a pastor. We were talking about Christianity. He came over for lunch at my place some time back. And initially I was wary of talking religion with him, that, look, if I had my way, I'll ban religion from Africa. You know, I think it's the bane of this continent, you know. It should be taught like a language. But he said to me, yes, that in a way he agrees that the word Christians, right, when people say I'm a Christian, that the way it started out was people looking at the followers of Christ and saying these people are behaving Christ-like. Exactly. And it wasn't the Christians of the day that said, I am a Christian. It was people looking at their actions, saying these guys are behaving like that.
Like that Christ guy.
That Christ
Remember
guy.
that Christ guy we saw?
Christ guy.
They act like him and they think like him.
Which means it's about being Christ-like versus whether you're Methodist, Catholic, Protestant, or whatever you are. So which brings me to where I am now. I see myself more as I'm spiritual. I believe in one God. But my belief in one God has now been affirmed more by my traditional beliefs. And I know there are different African traditional beliefs, but I'm Yoruba. And the Yoruba traditional beliefs tells me that there is only one God, which is Eledumare. Okay? And that's what we call him in our Yoruba tradition. Yes, we have certain what you could call deities. The Christian will say we worship, or Yorubas worship many gods. No, it is also this issue of language. So they have Ogun, they have Shango. Shango is what the white guy copied and called Thor. Shango is the king of thunder.
Oh,
and he also carries a hammer, actually. Yeah.
Interesting.
So Shango is the king of thunder. You have Ogun, which is for iron. And we have a whole range of they are like, we call them orishas, okay? And you will use the orishas to get to Eledumare, which is the supreme God. Now, obviously, when the white man came and they looked at that belief, they assumed that those orishas were gods. So they would say, oh, you worship the god of iron. You worship the god. But there's no part within the language itself that says Ogun or Shango is a god. The word God, Olorun, Olodumare, is reserved only for that one entity.
That is interesting that you say that, because I think that's the misconception with the ancestral stuff, where people think you're worshipping the ancestors, but you're not. You're actually paying tribute to the ancestors because there's only ever one God, The idea of worshipping ancestors is not really true or authentic to Africa at all. There was never an ancestral worship. There
The
was an
intermediaries.
yeah.
The same way that the
God
saints,
has always been God.
the Catholics have saints. You don't say that their religion is evil because they have saints this, saints that, And I still believe, bringing it back, it's as Fela would say, it's all colonial mentality. No, it's true. It's colonial mentality. We still have a colonial mentality. And because of that, everything that is African is seen as evil. I'm sure there are Christians that will listen and say, hey, this guy, hey, God forbid.
No, but you see, like from what you're touching on, and the essence of Christianity should have been what you said, like people who are Christ-like. I know there's that famous quote from Saint Francis of Assisi, who said, "Preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words." Because your lifestyle is just meant to be like, okay, this, and the same example that you gave, people who look and say, this guy behaves in a certain way. And so, yeah, no, I'm with you on that particular point.
Is there a word for Satan in your African language?
Satana. I don't know.
So in ours,
We don't have. I don't know it. If there's one, I don't know it.
Yeah, no.
in ours
yeah.
we have, and it's not Satan. In fact, there was a campaign. So there's a deity called Eshu. Okay, now that Eshu in Yoruba has also been translated in the Bible to mean, in the Yoruba Bible, to mean Satan. All right.
Yeah.
Now, Satan is not, or Eshu is not the biblical Satan.
Not that guy.
Not
Not
that-
the guy who used to be
but-
an angel
yes.
and then was cast
Yeah.
down into.
So, but if you look at the story, like funny enough, the Yoruba traditional belief also believes that in terms of the creation, that a deity was sent from heaven with a cock and a bag of sand, and the cock then separated the sand, and that's how the earth and the water were separated. That's
Wow.
That's that.
When you
And
say
this-
called like the chicken, the male
chicken,
chicken.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I thought
Now,
you meant
on-
like with the champagne bottle, the cork.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been penis, right? It
No,
couldn't
no,
have
no,
been a
no,
penis. I mean, the deity came down with a penis, and the penis decided.
Separating
That's
sand
correct.
and-
No, not that.
No, so
You
not
know-
a cock.
different story,
Yeah.
different movie.
Different movie.
Different movie.
Different script. Different religion.
Wow.
Yes. So it's not. So what the issue in the Yoruba traditional belief is a trickster, and he is also one that God or Eledumare, used to send to test all the other orishas.
Wow, it's a lot like Greek mythology. This thing.
Exactly.
yeah.
It's a lot like Greek mythology.
And you know how I fell in love with it when I was a kid? So I did my formative years in the UK. And I loved Greek mythology. I just couldn't we used to have this thing called library class or whatever, that we would go to a big library. And I'll somehow run away from my class and I'll find myself in the adult section. And I just love reading about Greek mythology and history. And they'll kick me back to the kiddies section to start reading Snow White and all that crap. So when I got back to Nigeria, because I didn't know anything about all this, Shango and all of that.
Right.
And immediately I discovered that I'm like, geez, man. And I'm part of this?
Yeah, like wow.
Whoa!
That's
so
that's
I just,
like that scene
so
in
initially
Black
it wasn't a
Panther.
spiritual thing for me. I just loved the stories.
Yeah.
Right? As a kid.
Yeah.
Obviously, as I then mature, but these
started
aren't just
connecting
stories.
dots.
There's a spirit, there's a spiritual element to all these stories.
Yeah.
But so I just shift. I mean, I still like Greek mythology, but
Yeah, I
somehow
love Greek
I just
mythology.
felt, hell no. Hercules, Zeus,
Yeah, one side.
just one side, man. This is where I'm
Football
at.
is what I'm about right
You know,
now. You
you
said
know?
it's like Black Panther?
No. Just that whole movement where people are feeling like there's an Africa being unearthed, where there's all these good things that they never knew of before, even
Oh,
though
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
even though it's pretend. It's
It is. It's like
connecting it to them.
Wakanda, basically.
Yeah.
You know, there's a book that I used to buy for people called The Ways of the Orishas. And they were talking about the tenets of the Yoruba traditional belief. And the first one was they claim that there is no devil. And I was thinking, first time I read that, I'm like, oh, nah, okay, maybe these guys are, But I started thinking about it. Now, understand that this is a belief system that has existed for thousands of years, around 3,000 years or so, okay? And I realized they're actually right. And I'll tell you, from the Bible itself, okay? They didn't say there's no evil. See, if you look at the Bible, right? Who is the devil? Lucifer, right? Now, Lucifer was at one time God's favorite angel. That's what the Bible tells us, right? He had an amazing voice. He was one that used to sing for God, right? He was actually God's favorite angel. And it was out of jealousy and greed. He wanted to be like God, right? And then he got kicked out from heaven. Now, before Lucifer got kicked out of heaven, who was the devil?
Was there a devil?
That's what I'm trying to say. There wasn't. Because Lucifer became the personification of evil, and therefore we refer to him as a devil. But there was a time where he hadn't fallen from God's grace. So as of that time that he hadn't fallen from God's grace, who was the devil? There was no devil, but there was the potential for evil, right? So he fell victim to evil, meaning he allowed. So evil in itself is not necessarily a
Like
person. I mean, I'm just using. I know the pastors will probably come and say in Matthew one thing, the something.
No, you're definitely allowed to have your own opinion.
Yeah,
Even in the church.
But logic, right? And I believe that if I can think logically, then that is a manner in which God thinks. Because if I'm made in His image, His
Yeah.
image for me is not a physical image, right? So logic in itself, I think, is also a godly way of thinking.
But what's good about what you're saying is for many people listening to the podcast, what we are given is what we live. So if you are dished, people aren't thinking. You know what I mean? Like, and so if you think and it takes you places, the good thing is you're thinking, which there's currency and there's value in that, because it's a world apart from just sitting down and being told ABCD is life, and you're like, yes sir, ABCD is life, and living your life like that. What's the good in that?
I think when you're younger, ABCD's life is where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you get older, you're like, but why?
Yeah.
And once you start saying, but why?
Yes.
It opens up a whole
Absolutely.
new world
Yeah.
of outlook, perspective, knowledge, But why is one of the best things you could ever do, whether it's in
Absolutely.
the church, whether it's in school, academia, or even in politics. But why? Yo, man, that's a
And I think we have to interrogate more. And I think the fact that we don't interrogate as Africans, I know it might be like a broken record. I still think it comes from colonial legacy, where we were punished for challenging the white man. We're punished for challenging the colonial authority, right? And I think it's still ingrained in us, but we just don't know it. We've got this culture of we don't want to interrogate
or challenge.
anything. The fear of what we're going to discover at that end. Because I don't understand why we don't interrogate everything. We have to.
I agree. I totally agree. I think we definitely need to start having very real debates around certain things we take like as gospel. We take things as norm and as truth. We don't really know why we do. I want to ask you on that, just to slowly start moving away from all the things they say you must never talk about. Don't talk about religion. We talk about religion. Never talk about politics. We go in on politics. But and I love that we do that, because what's the point of conversing if you don't go there? You have to go there with these things. social engagement now seems to be the only way we can interrogate issues in a very real sense, like in a very sort of meaningful sense. And social engagement, it seems, is primarily happening on the social networks. So your Twitters, Instagram to a lesser extent, Facebook maybe to a slightly bigger extent than Insta. How meaningful a debate like this can you have on those platforms, given that it seems to be the best place to be having conversations at this point?
Oof.
I think it'll be shut down real quick.
Because you could be like Ashwin, do
yeah.
something that literally polarizes people to the left or polarizes people to the right, and there's no actual debate. There's just like, hey guys, I'm on the right, and by the way, you're on the left, screw you. Hey guys, I'm on the left. Are you on the right? Well, screw you. And then that's the engagement.
While you're thinking on that, Fabian, I wanted to just bring up something which I saw today, incidentally. So there's an American preacher called Jesse Duplantis. I used to watch him, back on TBN. Wealthy gentleman, he's got a few planes or whatever. And so headline was that he's wanting to get a private jet.
Oh, yeah, 54 million.
But the headline was pasted on social media by who? Kirk Franklin.
Wow.
Who says, if we're talking about things these days, let's talk about this. And he says why it's wrong for, and which previously wasn't the case, where the church used to be like a homogenous entity, we're all into this prosperity thing. And for me, it was refreshing to see a guy like
He's
Kirk
always been a rebel.
point a finger, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's interesting, but I think maybe talk to that point.
Before you go in, that they are doing that is testament to where we are with social media.
Yeah.
People who you thought were part of a united front, like you are the sorority of preachers and pastors, you will never speak badly about each other. Joyce Meyer will never say anything bad about Bishop T.D. Jakes. Now they're out here like, hey guys, look what that guy did. Damn.
Yeah, well, it's my only fear about social media engagement is I think people are becoming more intellectually siloed.
Yeah.
And there's this show on Netflix that what's that guy that used to do? Is it a late night show? He's got this thing where he interviews
Letterman.
Letterman.
Yeah.
And he did the first one with Obama.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw it.
I saw it, yeah.
I love that
There
series.
was a part where Obama was talking about when they did this research about the Arab Spring.
Yes.
And so what they did was they did a search they put 3 different posts, I think. One that was talking more in terms of supporting the Arab Spring. One that targeted the conservatives, and in the same square, right? You got 3 different results. And the reason why you got 3 different results was the analytics targets people that they feel have a certain kind of ideology, a certain kind of political leaning, and they push that kind of information to them. So you then find out that the ones that had more pro-Arab Spring leanings didn't see, right, the post that was talking more to the right.
It just didn't feature on their feeds.
So it's like through the lens that
It's through the lens.
Yeah.
So literally, if you see the world through one particular lens and you're constantly on social media, you will only see the world in that lens.
Yeah. Right.
And I remember, a lot of the things that I've picked up and learned has been having healthy debates like this with
Right.
people with different opinions.
Yeah.
Because we can actually come together. But in social media, I think people tend to only lean towards people that share their point of view. So it's like, if you don't like what I'm doing, you can unfriend me.
I'll unfollow you.
I'll unfollow you.
In the end, you're just talking to yourself. Really.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you see people put that disclaimer. I'm about to write this and I don't care. If you don't like it,
You're Crazy for like that in the real world.
Whereas you can't go into a university and say, you know what? I'm coming into my room right now, and anyone that doesn't like green, get the hell out of this hostel. You can't do that.
No, you definitely,
Right?
you definitely can't do that.
So you're forced to literally, whether you like it or not, you're forced to listen to the opinions of others. You're forced to learn. It might not sink in then, right? You might be 60 years old and then think back, you know what? There was that guy that said, But now you're only going to literally hear yourself from other people's opinions.
Like
other
an echo
people's-
chamber.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my only worry with social media. I think there's so much information out there, and people are getting dumber.
I agree. With
You
so
know
much
what's gonna have to
information, you
happen
should
to
be getting
Fabian?
smarter.
Fabian, we're gonna have to do like Fabian Key Africans Unlocked Part 1.
Fabian, we're gonna bring back. I'm telling you right this second. We're gonna bring him back because if we don't bring him back here, I'm gonna end up just inviting him to my house and sitting at a dinner table where we have real conversations
Because we're bordering
and
on
not
an hour and
sharing
we haven't
that.
even touched on what you do.
Dude, we haven't even talked about your
production, we haven't
company.
talked
We haven't
yeah.
talked about what you're working on right now. I wanted to also talk about like love and relationships. You know, I also wanted to speak about you. Strike me as a very confident guy. You know how you roll. You're very, like, you're very secure within yourself, and I feel like there's a lot of gems to be shared about that. You know. Because I find a lot of people are having issues with confidence when they're in a space where they need to step up and perform.
Yeah.
It's a thing, you know. Whereas for you, it just seems so natural. You know, it's like, you know, you get those guys who just come across like,
Yeah, I
I
got,
got
this.
this. You know what I mean? And it's a shame that we'll have to bring you back and talk those things, man. It's terrible that we've run out of time. And then in a podcast, brah, how can you even be saying you run out of time? But, you know, we have other considerations at this point. I am definitely going to have you make a date at some point in the future.
It's great to be here. I'll just leave on one.
By the
note,
way,
though.
just tell people what you do, just in case.
What do I do?
Because we didn't even get into biographical.
I
We just jumped in.
You know what I mean? Like I spoke about the fact that you're an award-winning. You know, maybe let's start there.
Yeah, but that was how you see him. But how does he see him? And then we'll jump into rapid fire.
I run a production. I'm a creative. I'm a creative spirit. I think I'm a creative spirit. I act, I write, I run a production company. But I think that I'm a creative spirit in the sense that I want to create and tell stories. And I've always wanted to do that from when I was around, I think, 12. I just wanted to write. You know, from the minute I read a book, and as I was flipping through the page, I was reading a novel. I think it was James Hadley Chase, and I just knew where the story was going. And I just said, it was like an epiphany. I just knew this was what I was meant to do. And I started writing in class and giving the stories out to my friends. And then one day, I read James Baldwin. Up until that time, if I read Harold Robbins, or if I read Robert Ludlum, I think I need to write like Robert Ludlum. And then I read James Baldwin. I can still remember that day. My life changed. All of a sudden, I saw life through the lens of oppression, philosophy. James Baldwin just opened my eyes. And from that point, I knew the type of writer, type of creative I wanted to be. I had to do things that say something. And it was weird, you know. That moment, I will never forget it, because I said, when I was in the UK, I never knew I was a victim of racism. And it was when I read James, I started reading about the life, you know, African American. Like, shit, it's like that effing PE teacher, man. Damn, was that what that shit was about? Yeah. And everything just hit me. It was like an awakening. Then all of a sudden, even politics, where I was, you know, the newspapers started mattering, you know. Then I started reading newspapers, started understanding all these coups that are taking place across Africa, and I discovered Sankara. You know, So for me, that was my moment.
Perfect. Sorry, I want to go back to the confidence thing. That's so beautiful. What would you say was the same thing that gave you that confidence, and what kind of pointers do you wanna give out in that sense?
I mean, I've never really sat down to, you know,
Think about
to
it.
think about. But if I think I'll still bring it back to that moment,
Right.
and everything progressing from there, because I think from that point in time, I became more confident in accepting who I was. First as an African, because that's when, you know, Greek mythology, just take the side road, you know, there's this Yoruba mythological world that I want to embrace, you know. I began to embrace everything now, and I didn't care that whether it was cool or not really didn't matter to me, right? And I think it evolved from there, and from then on, I just learned that later on in life, I learned that for me, true wealth is contentment. I think once you know your level of contentment in life, you're wealthy. Whether intellectual, if you know that you can't speak English and you're content with who you are, I believe that you're far more expressive and far more articulate than the guy who's got a PhD in English and still wants to be a philosopher or whatever. You know, I think contentment is key in life. And I think once you're content, and when I say content, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be impoverished, but you're actually confident of, I'm happy where I am. I think that gives you a certain confidence that you can't buy.
It reminds me, I mean, we're going to rapid fire, but it reminds me, since we've been talking about preaching and spirituality, about a preacher who was given, he was in church, and so he pulls out a guy from the audience who's like a theater actor, and he says, do the Lord's, the Psalm 23. Yeah, so the guy goes, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And he expresses it, and it's amazing, and everyone claps, and then a boring preacher goes up and does the same thing, the Lord is my shepherd. And then somebody says, okay, so he's done it greatly, but he looks like he knows the shepherd. You know what I mean? Talking about the preacher who kind of just expressed it. And so, yeah, that confidence which comes out of knowing, being self-assured and knowing who you are, that's deep, you know.
Powerful stuff, man. We're going to go into rapid fire as we wrap it up. Now, rapid fire, just to brief you, I ask you 5 questions. Wait, let me see. 1, 2, 3,
Why in the
4,
bulletproof
5.
vest?
6 questions.
Okay.
You can't look at the phone. With
Okay.
No cheating.
It's not a test. You're not going to pass or fail this thing. And then you just say whatever resonates with you.
Okay.
If it's a sentence, just tell me what you feel. If
Okay.
it's an option between 2 options,
Okay.
just tell me which one you resonate with.
Okay.
And then Chilu and I, depending on whether or not we want to dig in, we'll dig in.
Okay.
Now, why we call it rapid is because we should be done with this quickly.
It's just
And
like
I know
60
you're,
seconds.
you're coming back for at least another episode. So you got a lot in you. Hold it back a little bit and give us the summarized, condensed version.
Go for it.
What's going on here? Sorry, 1 second. For some reason, I'm having issues with mine. Oh, I think it's the cable.
The cable under the table.
The cable under the table. Okay, we're good again. The cable under the table is acting up. Do you want us to do them or must I?
You do.
Okay, let's go. Since I have the phone right here. We'll start. TV or digital?
Digital.
As a businessman, and you are a businessman, Jay-Z or Diddy?
Jay-Z.
Coffee or whiskey?
Whiskey.
Tarantino or Eastwood? Yeah, you got to be careful because you might get a movie from either one at this point. You might get a movie from
Okay, I have
either
to think
one.
about it in terms of movies, okay, because they're personalities, because...
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like movies,
there's
movies,
yeah, there's always that.
Okay,
now.
then Eastwood if it's just
I thought you were going to
movies.
say Eastwood.
So you're just doing movies?
Yeah.
And if you're not just doing movies?
Screw them both.
That's honest.
Okay. Netflix chill or going to the movies?
Going to the movies.
Okay, fair enough. Spoken like a true actor.
Yeah.
Who has a lot invested in going to the movies. And finally, iPhone or Samsung?
Samsung.
Oh,
Even though
my
I use an
guy,
iPhone.
My guy, put it there.
Even though I use an iPhone,
Put
but that's
it
because of
right
my
there.
wife, but Samsung.
I'm gonna say put it there as well because I recently just moved. You know what I mean? And all the iPhone people in this podcast like, "Ah!"
My dude, welcome.
Last one.
I know you will not regret the move you've just made.
Yeah,
know?
let's see. you
No,
know.
no. I use an iPhone, but I prefer a Samsung. I use an iPhone because
It looks
my wife
beautiful.
insisted. But personally speaking, if iPhone was a person,
Yeah.
he's a freaking capitalist pig. No, because they locked you into everything.
They got you.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
no,
it's
they
like,
got you.
what the hell?
I know, man. I'm
Yeah.
also on both actually. Still, you know.
Is it?
I've moved to Android. I've moved to Samsung, but I still, I still got the iPhone there.
I've
Just-
never had an iPhone in my life. Bro.
Really?
And I've never had a MacBook.
iPhone is a digital colonialist.
DC.
DC. My wife has only ever had Apple phones. She's never, or in the Blackberries before. But Dude, thank you so much for coming through the Key
Thanks,
Africans.
guys.
We really appreciate
been great.
having you, man. And you know we've been postponing so many times.
I know.
It must have been like what, like 3 weeks worth of postponing? It's terrible.
It was worth it.
Yeah, sorry for the back and forth. It was
Great
our
stuff
fault.
you guys are doing here, man.
Nah, man, we
Thank
look forward
you,
to
my
the encore episode.
Yeah.
And there'll be more. And good luck with everything else you're doing in the future, with the
Thanks,
family and with the career.
Thanks,
And
bro.
may you keep asking why. But why?
But why?
God bless you, my brother. Big
Continue
up.
speaking Vanak.
Are you speaking Banana? You down there? You down there? Are you speaking Banana? Big up, guys.